Hi everyone. Where have I been? I have been busy. Life has been busy and so have I. Actually this morning I have been at the dentist. I've had 2 fillings replaced. So this side of my face is still quite numb. Not entirely numb the way that it was just even an hour ago, but still pretty numb. 3 shots it took, 3 injections in order to get these fillings done. Not that I'm complaining, I would rather have the injections before having my teeth drilled into than not have them. So, and my dentist is brilliant, he did such a good job, and yeah, I'm really pleased with the work, although I'm at that kind of trepidatious stage now where I'm just waiting for the anaesthetic to completely wear off, and I'm slightly wondering, will there be any pain? Will it be any discomfort when it all wears off? So if I suddenly scream and clutch my jaw and fall off the chair, then don't be alarmed, you'll know why. The other weird thing about going to the dentist now, I don't know if you guys have this experience, but my dentist, he's a brilliant dentist, but he has this thing now, maybe all dentists do, where he seems to want me to know exactly what's going on in my mouth while he's working. Or at least in stages as he's working. So he'll give me a mirror every so often and ask me to look in the mirror so that I can see some of what's going on, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to see what's happening in my mouth. I just want to be given anaesthetic and for the work to be done. I'd be quite happy, in fact, to be given a general anaesthetic and for the work to be done while I'm asleep. But given that they don't do that at the dentist anymore, although they used to. I remember I used to get the gas, that would make you fall asleep before you had a tooth pulled when you were a kid. Oh, that was amazing. The weirdest dreams I had on that gas. Anyway, yeah, they don't do that now, so you just have to have the kind of local anaesthetic, and I would be quite happy if the whole of my head was numb, but they just numb one part of the mouth, and it worked. It was good. It was done. It was over quite quickly, and here I am now, possibly drooling, but nonetheless I survived, and I've made it back to make a video. The first video in what seems like ages, and that is, as I say, because I've been very busy, and also, if I'm really honest, I've been kind of struggling a bit to think about what this next video would be about, because in my last video I spoke about I've done a couple of walkthroughs and so on, but of decks. But I also have spoken a bit about going into depth year 2019, which a number of us are doing, where my depth year is going to be about not buying lots of new books and lots of new decks and focusing only on what I've already got, apart from 1 or 2 very notable exceptions, and also using that time to really drop into a study of non-dualism, the study of teachings around non-dualism, like A Course in Miracles and the work of Ramana Maharshi and Advaita Vedanta studies and so on. So part of what I've also been thinking about in preparing for that is how to finish up on some of the things that I've been talking about on this channel, so that I can kind of clear the decks a bit, ready for next year and the things that I want to talk about next year, which is going to be some more of the same, but also some new things, I think, some new perspectives. And one of the things that I wanted to finish up on, of course, is my series on magic, and that is what this video is going to be about. It's going to be a look at magic and thinking about what magic means, and a bit of a further distillation of my thoughts on magic. Now, I had been thinking about doing this great long series and sort of covering some ground that actually, when I stopped to think about it, I realise has been covered so many times. If you want to know about magic or you want to find out about magical practice, there's lots and lots of information available, and I am going to do some of that. I'm going to cover some of that, but what I thought I would do is, rather than go over lots of old ground, I would cut straight to the chase and talk about magic in the sense that I think of magic and the way that it works and why it works. And that really is what this video is going to be about. It's going to be about magical models. There have been various models proposed for magic and how magic works, if indeed it does work. So I want to talk a bit about those models, and then I also want to talk about my own magical model. And by my own, I just mean my own conceptualization of how I think magic fits into fits into my philosophy of life, shall we say. And I want to start by doing what I've done in the last couple of magic videos, which is to further refine my definition of magic. Because you'll remember that I proposed a definition of magic in my very first video on the subject, and then in the next video I refined it further. And I fully acknowledge that redefined version, or redefined definition of magic, was incredibly long-winded and clunky. Clumpy, I almost said. It was clumpy too. So the definition I had then was magic is the art and craft of using will and imaginative practice to bring consciousness and reality into empowering equanimity. What a mouthful. But it does say what I wanted it to say, and it does describe what I think magic is, and certainly what it means to me in my philosophy of life. However, I have, I hope, succeeded in truncating it a bit so it was a bit simpler, a bit more snappy. And so my new working definition of magic, my refined working definition of magic, is that magic is the art of using intention and imagination to bring consciousness and reality into harmony. So I'll say that again. The art of using intention and imagination to bring consciousness and reality into harmony. And I'll explain that a bit more when I talk about my model of magic. But before I do that, I want to say something about some of the other magic models that are doing the rounds out there. So, in terms of models of magic, really, to figure out what models of magic are used by different magicians, one has to think about what are the underlying assumptions about reality that those magicians possess. And that gives you a sense of the models that they're using to underpin their magic. And you know, just to maybe talk a little bit about what I perceive to be some of the primary models of magic that I'm aware of and that I've observed. And I'll start maybe with one that I suppose if I was to give it a name, I would maybe call it a kind of theistic model of magic. And that is the idea that there are gods, god forms, or a god that is in some way in charge of things, is running the show, as it were, in a kind of conscious way. And the magician is able to tap into that god's will and, if you like, kind of petition the god or the gods in order to have them mold things in line with the magician's desires and wants and intentions. So although lots of religious people would not describe it as such, one could look at prayer as being a technique of this theistic model of magic, this idea that reality can be manipulated and shifted in your own, in line with your desires, by appealing to some kind of omnipotent, godlike creature. And you know, that's what some other forms of magic, like Kabbalistic magic, or some parts of Kabbalistic magic, could perhaps be likened to. So that's one way of looking at it, and perhaps a slightly, also, I should just say before we move on to that would also hold true for any other magic where you are petitioning to some deity. So if you are working within the Wiccan tradition and you appeal directly to the goddess and the god, these deities, then you are applying a kind of theistic model of magic, where you are saying, I recognize that there is this godlike being, and that godlike being has power, and I want that godlike being to use that power in a specific way, hopefully for good intentions and hopefully for the betterment of all, but you know, it depends what the magician is asking for in that sense. So that's one model of magic, and of course it's dependent on, to some extent, it's dependent on believing in, or at least believing in the possibility of there being deities, gods, within this reality. Another model, which is similar to that and is perhaps, but it's less theistic, is the spirit model. And that's the idea that the world, reality, the universe is ensouled in some way, and that there is spirit within it, and spirit might take the form of deities and so on, but it might also simply take the form of there being a soul within all living things, and perhaps in non-living things as well. The soul of a plant, the soul of a tree, the soul of a bird, the soul of a rock, the spiritual essence, if you like, of everything that is. And the spirit model is one where the magician is trying to tap into these spiritual forces. And again, you could look at witchcraft in some forms as being about that, particularly kind of hedge riding, that kind of shamanistic approach to things, where the magician or the shaman tries to drop into this deeper spiritual level and engage with spiritual entities as a way of moulding reality in a particular way. And of course, you know, the assumption there is that for most people these spirits are invisible. They're not something we're all aware of all of the time, but the magician or magicians or the witch has the power to communicate with them in some way, either directly, and some would claim to be able to speak to and see spirits and to have spirit guides, etc., or perhaps angelic guides, and angels, depending on your view of angels, would perhaps fit somewhere between the theistic model and the spirit model, depending on what you believe angels to be. So the idea being that the magician or the witch can tap into these forces and either see them or act with them, maybe not by directly seeing them or hearing them, but by engaging with them symbolically. And if you're a tarot card reader or an oracle card reader, and you believe that the fall of the cards is guided in some way by spirit, then one could say that you are subscribing to the spirit model of a tarot reading and understanding how that works, if that's what you think. So another model that perhaps is, again, they kind of blend into each other. They're all like kind of Venn diagrams with, you know, overlapping circles. So the theistic model and the spirit model certainly overlap. Another model that potentially overlaps with the spirit model is perhaps the idea of the energy model. And that's the idea that everything is energy, and you know, of course, science tells us this. We know that even solid things like this measuring tape, although it appears solid, if you were able to look really closely at it, you would see that it actually was this kind of whirling soup of energy, and not even particles. That, you know, at some level we are talking about waves of energy, and energy is a very overused word, but you know, we'll just use it for now because it does kind of imply this kind of immaterial essence. And the idea behind the energy model is that it's possible to somehow tap into that model and to engage with it, and to kind of manipulate it. And this is where a lot of energy work, like you know, in some disciplines, the manipulation of chi or ki, life energy, either through physical movement like Tai Chi or Qigong, or people who, you know, magicians who would use kind of laying on of hands in healing as a way of manipulating and moving energy. So that's another model that you can subscribe to without necessarily having to believe in the idea of conscious spiritual beings. Because the thing about the spirit model is there's this kind of implication that you are dealing with conscious beings like ourselves that just exist on a different plane, whether it's a godlike being or an angel or some kind of other spirit being. So there's that kind of energy model. Then another model that one might think of is the mental model. And the idea of the mental model is, of course, that magic works because what it's really doing is it's working on our subconscious. It's working on something deeply inside us that we're not consciously aware of, and that is what shifts things in our life. So whereas in some of the other models you might say the magician carried out a ritual in order to petition a deity or an angel or a spirit of some sort, or carried out a ritual in order to manipulate energy in a particular direction in order to get something done. The mental model, or you might call it the psychological model, works on the basis that the ritual, the spell, whatever the magical practice is, works on the magician at a subconscious level, using conscious intention and action to tap into the subconscious or the unconscious, the part that is hidden, in order to move things in a certain direction. And an explanation for the way that that might work is, let's say you're doing a spell for greater prosperity because you are feeling impoverished. And or maybe you are impoverished, maybe you literally are lacking in resources, and so you do this spell in order to improve your financial standing or your prosperity. And let's say the spell works and you are better off as a result. Maybe you get some money from somewhere, maybe you get a new job, maybe somebody tells you, maybe you get a letter from the taxman saying, oh, you've overpaid your tax, here's a rebate, or something delicious like that. So in other words, some more resource pours into your life. Now, the question would be, did the magic manipulate something externally, or did it manipulate something internally within you that either meant that the way that you acted and interacted with other people, maybe in the workplace or with your friends or indeed with the taxman or whomever, resulted in them relating to you in a way that sent more resources in your direction? Or it could be that actually nothing has changed physically in your life, but your perception has changed, and so there's been a mental shift, and you may notice resources that you didn't notice before, or you may appreciate things you didn't notice before, or you might relieve yourself of some pressure to do some things that you thought you had to do that were putting pressure on your budget, and now you've taken that pressure off. So the question would be, did the psychological model, did it actually manipulate the external reality, or did it manipulate your internal reality, which in turn had an impact on the external? So that's another model that some magicians would subscribe to. And we're beginning, of course, now to get into the territory of things like NLP. And in fact, one of the very first books, I don't know why but the reason I'm looking surprised is my neighbour has just run down to the bottom of her garden, sprinkling pieces of bread left, right and centre, and now she's running back up to this end of her garden, having done that. I mean, she always puts bread out, but she doesn't usually sprint as she does it, so maybe she's cold. It is quite cold outside, actually. So anyway, where was I? That was a slight distraction. Yes, so we're beginning to get into the territory of NLP, and in fact one of the very first books on NLP that was written, I think it was by Richard Bandler and some others, was called The Structure of Magic, and of course it is based entirely on this notion of using your psychological tools to shift your psychological state in order to create a better reality for yourself. So, and it's even got a wizard on the cover of it. So that is a bit about the information model. And then about the psychological model, which begins to also flow into the idea in this modern age of information and the use of information. So we've got thoughts in our mind that we can use as a kind of magical tool, but we can also manipulate information and data almost in the kind of information age sense. And there are some magicians who work on the basis actually of using sort of computing analogies in terms of programming in order to carry out their magic. So those are some of the models that are fairly well known historically. And if you think about any of the kind of famous magical practitioners of the past, where you think about the practitioners in the Golden Dawn, the Aleister Crowleys of the world, the Dion Fortunes of the world, if you think of the more kind of paganistic practitioners like the Wiccans and the traditional witches and so on, you probably can find that the work that they do fits into one or more or all of those models. So those are the kind of the models that are quite well known and that are probably most usefully used in magic. One of the magic models that has been a more recent invention, I suppose, certainly a more recent discovery, we might say, is of course chaos magic. And I'll probably say a bit more about chaos magic in a future video. But chaos magic is probably better to say what it's not. Chaos magic does not just mean do magic randomly and chaotically and hope for the best. Nor does it mean do magic in a kind of disorganized fashion. I mean, there's all kinds of rumors swirling around or misconceptions about chaos magic, that it's all about, you know, being naughty and bad and doing a spell while you wank and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, and that can be part of it. That is certainly one of the things that some chaos magicians would do in order to charge their magical practice. Can I use that word on YouTube? I think I probably can. In the UK, that is not a terrible word. That's a fairly mundane word. But if that shocked you, I apologise. So chaos magic is actually about using whatever magical model works. And the great thing about chaos magic is it allows you to borrow and pull from any other magic model. And you do it on the basis of using the model in the moment you need to use the model and acting as if it works, but only because in that moment of acting as if it works, that's going to give you the greatest chance of the spell or the intention meeting its target. So if you are doing a chaos magic ritual and you need to act as though you believe in this deity, even if you don't believe in deities, then that is what you do. If you need to pull on the idea of spirits that are helping you and you don't necessarily believe in spirits, for the moment of that part of the ritual, you do that. If you want to use the information model idea and you need to type something into your computer and send it off to an email address that you've set up specifically to be a recipient of your magical intentions, you do that. There's all kinds of different things you can do in chaos magic where you can pull all kinds of different models together and use them creatively. So that is my quick canter through some of the more common magical models. Now, what I was going to do is in this video go on to my magical model, but in the interest of actually doing a couple of shorter videos for a change, I'm actually going to make this a two-parter. So I'm going to close now. I'm going to make this the video for now, and my next video is going to be my magical model. Stay tuned.